Hello, guys. Welcome to Critical Thinking and Practical Reasoning. Today, we're still on Unit 3 and looking at Session 2, which is titled Informal Causal Arguments. The aim of this session is to explain what informal causal arguments are, state two main parts of informal causal arguments, give examples of informal causal arguments, and state the common fallacies associated with informal causal arguments. What is an informal causal argument? In the previous session, we've already looked at what a causal argument is. Now, this time, if we are looking at an informal causal argument, then we are considering causal arguments that are somewhat erroneous. So, an informal causal argument is the argument put forth to explain the cause or effect of something when the cause or effect hasn't been conclusively established, right? And this is what we mean. Let's look at the examples here. Example 1. Wherever elephant imprints are found in rocks, geologists are there. Therefore, geologists must be the ones making these imprints. By this example, we mean to say that in a setting of a zoo, wherever you find elephant imprints, you find geologists there. So quickly, the person assumes that the evidence of imprints being there and the evidence of geologists being there are causally related. So geologists must be the ones causing these imprints. But you see, there's no evidence showing that geologists are indeed the ones making these imprints. Let's look at the second example. I smell food. Someone must be in the kitchen cooking. Now, there's a lot of play on our senses that the mind can actually make you smell something when you're actually not smelling it, really. So, then you smelling food doesn't necessarily mean that somebody is in the kitchen cooking, right? So, drawing a necessary causal implication might make you wrong in some arguments like these. So, that is informal causal argument. Let's look at informal causal reasoning. And in informal causal reasoning, this occurs when a correlation is assumed when none exists. This is a false correlation, and this is what is referred in critical thinking as informal causal reasoning. In other words, informal causal reasoning is to assume something to be a cause of another and stating a connection between the two, where no such connection exists at all. Look at the first example. Our driver comes for us at 4 p.m. It is 4 p.m. Therefore, the car honk at the gate is our driver. Now, this example is erroneous because if it's 4 p.m., it doesn't necessarily mean that the car at the gate honking is your driver. Example 2. My mom prepares lunch, so the food in my lunchbox could not have been prepared by my dad. So, your mom being the regular person preparing lunch for you doesn't necessitate that your dad cannot be the one to have prepared the lunch this time. Now, what is understanding these causal errors leads us to the discussion of three common mistakes, which are causal fallacies. And the first of them is a false cause fallacy. So, what is a false cause fallacy? It's sometimes known in Latin as post hoc ego propter hoc, which is translated in English as after this, therefore, because of that. Alright, after this, therefore, because of this. And it occurs when one assumes that one thing caused another merely because the first thing preceded the other. So because A comes after B, A comes before B, we think that, oh, necessarily A caused B to happen. And that is an error to think that, because oftentimes, events might follow each other, but they don't have any causal relationship. So let's look at an example here. Our garage sales made lots of money before Joanne showed up. Obviously, she's scared of all of the customers. Second example, she should not have stopped for coffee on the way to work. If she hadn't stopped, she wouldn't have had a fender bender. So these examples also commit the false cause fallacy. The next is a mistaken correlation for cause fallacy, and it occurs when one type of event or state of affairs is always or usually found in conjunction with another type of event or state of affairs and is mistakenly taken to be sufficient to establish that event or state of affairs are one type of one type cause the other. So look at the example here. All the times I have slept with my shoes on, I have had an unbearable headache when I woke up. So this person is trying to imply here that every time he sleeps with the shoes on, he wakes up with an unbearable headache. So then that unbearable headache might be caused by he sleeping with his shoes on. Let's look at the second example. The absence of electricity makes thunder blast sound louder. So the implication here is that thunder blasts sound louder, and that loudness is generated by the absence of electricity. But it's not the case. Thunder blasts sound how they sound. But of course, when the place is there's no electricity, there's less distraction, and of course we hear it more clearer than when there are more obstructions. So that's mistaken correlation for cause. Let's look at an inversion of cause and effect fallacy. And this occurs when one infers that if X causes Y, an absence of X will prevent the presence of Y. So if X causes Y, when X is absent, Y will also be absent. And that's what this fallacy is saying. So look at some example here. If the bus driver comes for the if the bus driver come, the children will go to school. Thus, if the bus driver does not come or does not make it, the children cannot go to school. And it's not actually the case. Because if the bus driver does not come, the children can make it to school through other means. Right? Let's look at a second example. Addiction to candies can cause diabetes. Hence, you need to avoid candies to avoid diabetes. Now, if you avoid candies, you've not avoided diabetes. You could still get diabetes through other means, right? Now, weak analogy. A weak analogy is a fallacy that occurs when an arguer compares two or more things that aren't really comparable in relevant respects. So the example here says teachers of false religions are like carriers of a dead plague. Just as we rightly quarantine victims to prevent them from infecting others, so we should quarantine teachers of false religion to prevent them from spreading their spiritual poison. And these two concepts are not comparable, right? In this respect, they are not. So that commits a weak analogy. Lettuce is leafy and green and tastes great with a veggie burger too. Therefore, poison ivy probably tastes great with a veggie burger too. You know, because they might be similar, they don't necessitate a similar kind of taste. They are similar because they are flowers or they are leafy, doesn't necessitate that they will have a similar kind of taste. So that would be a weak analogy here too. This session has introduced us to the informal causal argument. We've read this session that is never legitimate to conclude that one thing cause another just because the two things occur together at the same time. This we learned is not legitimate because it can lead to fallacies like false cause, mistaken correlation for cause, or inversion of cause and effect fallacy. Thank you very much for your attention. We catch each other some other time. Bye.